memorization techniques that you can use to speed up learning new music, and usually a combination of several is required. What I can tell you is that repeating things over and over in your practice is one of the least effective ways, as it only relies on one memory path out of the 3 that we have available. In this video, I'm going to share how you can develop a different memory path, which when combined with other effective practice methods, will speed up your ability to learn new music. An essential part of memorization is making a cognitive association with the notes, rather than just relying on your muscle memory, which is what you acquire when you do repetitive practice. Memory codes can be written in various ways, such as using a mind map, a graphic representation of your score, or using the patterns within the music. There is no right or wrong way, and you may need to go on a voyage of discovery to see which method works best for you. If you are a beginner or your theoretical understanding of chords and patterns is minimal, then you'll probably find it best to start with a mind map or graphical representation of your music, which I'm going to come on to later in this video. But let's start with creating memory codes that are formed from the patterns within the music. You'll memorize the rhythm by using the 3rd memory path, which is auditory. So by vocalizing the counts and listening to the music and singing the tune from memory, you'll also speed up your learning, but you'll also gain familiarity of those rhythms. Now, I always recommend practicing in bite-sized sections, so if you've never created memory codes before, start small, maybe focus on just a couple of bars, perhaps a maximum of 4. The idea is that you create a memory code before you begin practicing the piece, so that you already know the notes which will make learning to play them easier. You can do this by identifying scale or chord patterns, using the harmonic framework and passing notes, identifying melodic devices such as repetition, imitation and sequence, using the intervals between the notes and the chords, and by using some letter names of the notes. Here's the first 4 bars of a piece called Survivor by Pamela Wedgwood. And if you study the music, you can see in the first 2 bars that all the notes belong to the chord of D minor, except the ones that I've highlighted in pink. You might also notice that the highlighted notes are all the same. They're all the note G. So my initial step would be to memorize the notes of the D minor chord if I didn't already know them. So that's D, F natural, A and D. And if you practice recalling these notes before you start to learn the piece and visualize how to play them on your instrument, you'll already be 1 step further along. We could then develop this memory code further to memorize the 2 bars more precisely. Now, there's no right or wrong way to do this, but for this example, your code could read something along the lines of a D minor chord descending with a G after the 5th. And what I mean by after the 5th is the 5th note from the chord of D, so that's the A. Then we repeat the 3rd and the tonic, so that's the 3rd note is the F and the tonic is the D. Then we've got G to the 3rd note twice, so that's G to F twice, followed by G to the 5th note, so G to A. And if we wanted to continue with this code to memorize bars 3 and 4, we just need to learn that bar 3 is a repeat of bar 1, and then we have 3 Fs followed by the note G. As your auditory skills improve and you're able to hear the melodic intervals, you'll likely only need to remember that the 2 bars are based on the D minor chord, and you've got 1 G in bar 1 and 3 Gs in bar 2. You see how there isn't a right or a wrong way to do this, you just have to give it a go. And if you can recall just a few notes, it will help you get off to a better start when you sit down to play your instrument. In this next example, which is a waltz for piano, using the harmonic framework may work better. And if you're just getting started with memorization, you could create separate codes for each hand. I'll show you in a moment how I would create a code for both hands simultaneously. So for the left hand, I might start by creating a code to memorize the framework of the chords. So we've got a D7 chord followed by a scale, then the chord of G with D in the bass, and then a B7 chord. If it helps, create yourself a short anagram to help you remember the order of those chords, something like don't go back. As you improve your knowledge of chords, you might create a code something similar to this one. Now I've used Roman numerals here, but you could use the letter names of the chords if you prefer. Memory codes are personal to you, so it doesn't matter how you create them, so long as they serve their purpose. In my code here, the arrow represents the scale going up from the note D to G in the bass. The Roman numerals give the arrangement of the chords, and then I've used the sharp sign to remind me that it's a D sharp after my last bass note, which was a D. In the right hand, we want to look for patterns to help us memorize the notes. Now the melody has an anacrusis on the dominant, that's the fifth note of the scale, then 3 Bs alternating with the notes of the D7 chord, which I've highlighted here in pink. There's a passing note E on beat 3, and the third bar has the same notes as the left hand, so the chord of G in second inversion, and that chord then leads to the note E before we have an octave D. Now as you gain confidence creating memory codes and your knowledge improves, you might look to create a code that combines both hands. So here's my memory code for this. We've got a D7 chord with a B in the right hand, followed by a scale with a turn, and then a passing note E. We've then got G in second inversion, followed by an octave, before the melody repeats over a B7 chord. Now for some, that may seem a little complicated if you don't know what a turn is and you don't know what those chords are. But as I said, anything that you can memorize before you start to learn the piece will help you make quicker progress. Over time, your knowledge will increase and you'll be able to develop your ability to create memory codes. Classical music is a great choice to get started with making memory codes, as composers often use chords 1 and 5. The music usually has clearly defined phrases and the melody is derived from the notes of the accompaniment. Here's a couple of examples. The first is a Bagatelle by Diabelli. If you look at the left hand, you'll notice that the chords are arpeggiated in bars 1 to 7. And if you study the pattern, you'll notice that you've got chord 1 twice, then we've got chord 5 in first inversion, then we've got chord 1 3 times before the dominant 7th with the third note omitted. And you can see how I've summarised that to create a memory code that reads 2 times 1, 5B, 3 times 1, 5, 7, omit 3. The melody has the notes of chord 1 followed by 5, 7 descending to the 5th. And remember, the 5th is the 5th note of the chord, so the chord is G, so that's G, B, D, so the 5th note is D. Then we've got the 3rd followed by the 1st followed by the 3rd over the chord of C, so that's the E, the C and the E, before we have a scale down descending to the note C. If you learnt those 2 bits of short code, you could write out the first 8 bars of this piece and then spend a practice session visualizing how you would play those notes, and then you'll have a much greater chance of playing them accurately on your first practice attempt. Now hopefully I'm giving you a few ideas of how you can put together a code to learn the notes of your piece before you practice them. When you combine this method with visualization, it means that you can almost learn to play a piece before you ever attempt to practice a note. Now, if your knowledge of chords is not that great, or you've only just started, or perhaps you're a visual learner, you could create a graphic representation of your score. Mind maps or graphic scores are a visual way of mapping out the music. You can use symbols, shapes and colours to draw a map of the key features of your piece and sketch the direction of the notes. If you're practicing a large-scale work, start by creating a mind map of each section, and then create an additional mind map for the work as a whole. Here's the first section of a Hungarian folk song by Bartók, and if you study the first 4 bars, you'll notice that they are the same. So you might want to call this the intro motive and represent it with a zigzag in the direction of the notes. You can see how I've done that here with my yellow zigzag, and then I've just put a bar across the top and called it the intro motive and written times 4 because that little bit is played 4 times. The next 4 bars uses the intro motive in the left hand, but the upper note changes from G to A to B and then back to A. And you can see how I've indicated that on my score by writing the zigzag and just the letter name of that note. For the melody, I've used just a red line to show the direction of the notes. Now you could practice drawing out your graphic score and visualizing it before you attempt to play the notes. Here's one final example from the first 3 bars of Chopin's Prelude in B minor. Now this time I've used shapes and lines on my mind map or graphical score. You could use the chord patterns if you prefer to create a code, as I showed you earlier. Neither method is right or wrong. Now on my graphical score here, the turquoise squares represent the note D, the pink squares represent the note F, and the zigzags are the B minor arpeggio. I've also used a little V to indicate where the notes move by step. Now for those that are not visual learners, this type of memory code may not appeal. But as I said at the start, you have to go on a voyage of discovery to see which method works best for you. And I'd encourage you not to dismiss it until you've given it a go. There are many ways that we can encode information, and if you want to store it effectively and retrieve it reliably, it's best to use a variety of methods. Making a cognitive connection with the notes through this type of conceptual analysis is highly beneficial, so I can't wait to hear how you get on in the comments below. Please do come back to this video once you've given it a go creating a memory code and let me know how you've got on. And if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so that these videos can reach and help more adults who are learning to play a musical instrument. Thanks for listening, and by the way, if we've not met, I'm Fiona from Learn Music Together, and helping adults improve their musical skills is my passion in life. New videos are released every Tuesday, and if you want further tips, please grab my free guide on practice tips that work. There's a link in the description below this video and some more videos for you to check out so that you can grow and develop your musical skills and play with confidence. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.